You're listening to old Western stories, where dust settles slow, guns speak loud, and every tale rides straight into your imagination. Hit that subscribe and saddle up, the ride's just startin'. When the blizzard hit and the men fell, she bound her chest, took the reins, and rode through white hell alone. It came down first like sifted flour across the northern flats, a pretty lie on the edge of afternoon. And by the time anybody knew better, the wind had found its teeth and the sky had ground its color to bone. The ranch sat squat and square against it, boards chattering, eaves humming low, bales stacked as a windbreak that didn't break much. Horses blew steam and flung their heads, eyes rolling white. Cattle bunched tight in the lee of the long shed, hides crusting with sleet, the sound of their breath like 1,000 small engines trying not to quit. She worked among them without her name, coat snapped shut high, scarf to the nose, hat brim pinned down by ice. In the cookhouse window a lamp swung, a little sun with no heat. Danvers, the foreman, had gone down first, a skid on the ice at the corral gate and his leg bent where legs ain't meant to bend. Two of the boys hauled him inside, faces stiff with the kind of fear men don't say out loud. Chai came in from the east fence with frost clotted in his mustache and a cut across his cheek that wouldn't stop, the blood freezing and thawing and freezing again. Eli's glove tore off in the gate chain and the wind stole it. By the time she wrapped his hand with her scarf, his fingers had turned a color nobody keeps long. The yard filled with noise and went empty all at once, as storms do, everything happening and nothing moving. She counted what could stand. 2 horses sound, 1 half lame, 1 old but willing. 6 men breathing, 4 of them half useful and 1 of those lying. A feed sled, a broken harness. The nearest line shack with a stove stood 8 miles yonder by the cottonwoods on Dead Woman Creek. The rail spur town lay another 20 beyond that, with a telegraph that still clicked when the wire didn't ice. Supplies were due a day ago. The cloud bank came instead. Duty is a quiet word until it has to talk loud. She felt it then, hard as saddle wood against a cold knee. She ducked into the bunkhouse, door yanked near out of her hand by the pull of the wind, and the room tried to be warm and failed. A potbelly stove ticked, overmatched. Wet wool steamed. The air tasted like iron and old coffee. Danvers lay on the spare mattress with his jaw clamped, telling lies about how it didn't hurt while the bone told its own truth under the blanket. "Someone rides," he said, now. His eyes skipped past her because habit doesn't change easy and saw a man in every doorway by default. The talk in the room rolled past her like snow across a bare field. She took it without flinch. "No one rides in this," Eli croaked, cradling his mauled hand. "Not 8 mile, not 2. Then the herd dies in place," she said, voice low, steady. They looked not at her but toward the sound of her voice, like men do when a woman speaks where orders live. She kept on. "Salt and rolled oats are near out. The calves don't last the night without warm mash. We got 3 tarps worth of dam and 1 sled we might coax to the cottonwoods. The creek shack woodpile's thicker than ours." "That's a start." Chai leaned close to the stove, breath steaming. "You can't see your hand in this, miss." She didn't answer him by title. She couldn't afford the title. She stepped behind the hanging coats, and in that thin privacy that isn't private she stripped her shirts to her skin and wrapped herself tight with clean canvas torn from an oat sack, binding down the curve that told the wrong story. She tugged on Danvers's spare wool, big in the shoulder and thin in the elbow, cinched a leather strap across the chest to take the sway out of it. She let her hair down and braided it twice, tight and flat, tucking it up under the hatband of a black felt nobody would miss. Then she wound a second scarf round her neck and face till only her eyes lived in the slit between wool and brim. She looked like any hungry hand with small bones and more nerve than pay. She took the old canvas slicker off the nail by the door, the one greased till it stank, and shoved her arms into it. The room watched, slow understanding moving like treacle across tired faces. Danvers pushed himself up on one elbow and saw what he was meant to see, a narrow-shouldered wrangler with no time for manners. "You'll freeze," he said, not parting the words enough to make them heavy. "Maybe," she said. "Herd freezes first." She went out before anyone could find the right shape of objection. The yard struck like a slap. The wind moaned through every gap in every board and then found new ones. The world had shrunk to 50 feet of white in any direction, and beyond that the feeling of more white, the land erased and made simple the way death is simple. She moved quick because slow is a kind of surrender. At the hitch rail, a bay mare planted her feet and set her head against the storm like an old woman's back against a gossip. "Good girl," she said, voice lost in the howl but touch speaking where sound didn't. The mare's coat crackled under the broom as she knocked ice plates free. She bent each leg and cleared the snow cuffs that would turn to chains in the first mile. Leather creaked, a tired, frozen music. Steel rang soft where a buckle kissed a ring. She ran the latigo, drew the cinch snug, tucked the tongue down, felt for the little give that means enough and not too much. She slid the bridle on with gloved hands and only had to start over once when numb fingers argued. The bit was cold as spite. The mare chewed it anyway, steam puffing. In the wagon shed she found the sled upright, the runners furred with ice, the tie rope stiff as bone. She hacked the rope loose with Danvers's belt knife and looped it through the horn for later. She'd worry how to haul it once she could see the creek. On the step she met Eli, lips blue, blanket around his shoulders like a cape. He held out a small canvas sack. "Brown sugar," he said. "You mash oats with it, they'll swallow. It'll fetch the sick ones up." His hurt hand shook and he tried to hide it. She took the sack and set it in her coat. "Thank you," she said, not soft, just true. Chai pushed a flask into her other palm. "Just enough to tell your blood to move," he said. She shoved it deep. Danvers yelled from inside something about the north fence, then swore because yelling put nails through his gut. She swung to the saddle while the wind leaned its whole weight into her, and the mare both. The first breath she took up there hurt like opening a door on a house you know is on fire. She looked once back at the yard and found what she needed to find. Not approval, not blessing, just the fact of a job and a line of cattle blowing frost into the world like a train with nowhere to go. She squeezed and the mare stepped out into the white and vanished from the yard in 4 strides. There is a way to ride a storm. It is not brave and it is not wise. It is work. You keep your head low to the wind so the edge rides your hat brim and not your eyes. You count steps from gate to lane and from lane to cottonwood because fences make numbers and numbers make maps when the world has none. You keep one hand on the horn to feel if the horse's try slips without warning, and you keep the other hand free because there are gates and death both, and both take fingers. She kept the barn to her back and the wind to her left cheek, which told her she was pointed north by northwest, and she aimed for the big rock that had saved 1,000 calves from sun and saved no one from winter. The rock had disappeared under drifts, but she knew where it sat in the land's memory. The mare broke trail, chest high in powder, then found crust and skittered before finding purchase. The wind screamed in every gap. It sounded like iron tearing all the time. Her breath iced the scarf, turned it to a board that tugged at her ears. She could feel the binding under the wool like a held breath that never finished. The world narrowed to white and pain, and the small black shapes of her mare's ears, pricked and brave. Half a mile out, she angled away from the swale where snow lies deeper than hell and took the long line across the bare rise where it blows thin. A tumble of fence pickets loomed and slid past like ghosts of trees. She ducked the top wire without thinking, lay flat over the withers to keep the wind from stealing her. The mare's neck was hot under her gloves. The creek came on silent, not water but a holler in the land, the cottonwoods looming like drowned giants, their tops laced with white. She found the road ruts by the way the snow draped over emptiness and followed that subtle lie because it was all she had. The line shack showed up sudden, a dark smear with a stovepipe that drew nothing. She slid down and shouldered the door, snow packed in the jamb like mortar. Inside it smelled of mice and old smoke and a good chance. She kicked the ash bed and found a little brown under the gray. Praise be. She lit it with a match struck on her boot heel and fed it curls of shaved board till the draft remembered. Heat is a slow kind of love. It answered by inches. She threw in 2 pieces of split pine, shut the door to a crack to keep what little warmth in and what big wind out. She didn't stay. The creek to the rail spur ran north by east, and the light was failing. What little had bothered to come. She took the last 5 minutes of stove heat in her gloved palms and then turned her back on it. The mare stamped and tossed. "I know," she said. "I know." She pulled her hat brim lower, set the scarf again, and climbed up with that grunt people make when they don't want to lie about how the day feels. The wind walked right through her coat and took a seat at her spine. She tightened the cinch one hole while the mare blew steam like a train. Snow needled her eyes and made salt in the corners. The flats waited with no mercy and less patience. She set her jaw in the way that makes a face into a promise. "I'll ride till the herd can breathe again," she said, and gave the mare her head, letting them both disappear into the storm's open mouth. Snow don't fall gentle past midnight, it hunts. It came sideways now, not down, knives instead of flakes, driven by a wind that had learned cruelty from the mountains. The mare bowed her neck and took it full on, steam rolling off her like she was burning slow in all that white. The world had no edge, no floor, just gray noise and motion. Somewhere behind, the ranch was buried under the storm's breath. Somewhere ahead, Dead Woman Creek waited under ice, and the shack crouched small in the dark like the last thought a body has before going under. Her scarf was a crusted board now, stiff where her breath froze it. Each inhale scraped her throat like sand. She leaned low over the horn, the mare's mane hitting her cheek like a wet rope, and counted out loud because the sound of numbers meant she was still here. 203, the wind took the rest. The saddle creaked, the only voice steady enough to trust. She could feel the bindings under her coat pressing like a fist against her ribs. Every breath reminded her what she'd hidden and why. It wasn't shame, it was strategy. Out here, the storm didn't care if she was woman, man, or ghost, but the memory of the ranch hands might have. So she'd bound down her heart along with her chest and hoped both held. The mare stumbled once, caught herself. "Easy, girl," she said, voice cracked to a whisper. The horse flicked an ear, the small mercy of acknowledgement. Wind tried the door to her soul again, rattling, testing for weak hinges. Time lost its map. The moon might have been up there, buried in gray, or maybe that light was just frost on her eyelashes. Her mind began offering ghosts to fill the space the living left. She saw her father walking fence lines in a spring storm years ago, his back bent against sleet, his hand steady on her shoulder when she was no taller than the gatepost. "Work's the prayer that gets answered," he'd said, and she clung to that now because prayer without work don't warm your hands. Then another face rose, Danvers, jaw tight, telling her to stay put. Men always told women to stay put. She smiled under the frozen scarf, just a twitch, and it hurt like sin. "Guess you're right, Danvers," she muttered. "I'm staying put, just a few miles ahead of where I started." The mare slowed, chest heaving. Snow crusted her fetlocks, ice clung to the reins. She tried to lift her head and couldn't. "No," she said, leaning down, rubbing the mare's neck. "You don't quit here. Not while I'm still borrowing your legs." She dismounted slow, boots sinking to the knee, the world trying to fold her in. She took the reins close, felt the tremor in the horse's jaw. "We're gonna walk a spell," she said. "You and me." She stepped forward, leading, feet finding the hard spots by habit. Each step stole a bit more heat. Her fingers had stopped talking back an hour ago, her toes following suit. The wind screamed over the flat, found its own rhythm and didn't need her anymore. She thought she heard singing then, low and thin, something her mother might have hummed when dishes rattled in a spring windstorm, but the tune wasn't right, too slow, too far away. "Ain't time yet," she told the air, "not yet." A shape rose ahead, black and wrong in the white, and for a second her heart jumped because black means wall and wall means shelter. But it wasn't. It was a drift over a half-buried fence, barbed wire showing through like bones. She cursed soft, the words sticking to her tongue. The mare balked at it, eyes rolling. She patted the neck. "We jump or we freeze," she said. "Pick." The mare didn't move, so she moved for both. She backed her a few steps, then urged her forward. The horse lunged, half clearing it, back hoof snagging wire. The cry that followed wasn't horse or human, it was both. She dropped the reins and went to her knees in the snow, hands digging blind until she found the wire biting flesh. She worked it loose, fingers raw and clumsy, the metal cutting her gloves to ribbons. When it came free, she pressed the leg with both palms, whispering nonsense meant to soothe. The mare trembled but stood. Blood steamed in the cold, small and dark, already freezing at the edges. She tore a strip from the hem of her coat, wrapped it tight, used her teeth to pull the knot. "There," she said. "We're even, you carry me, I carry you." The world spun sideways for a bit after that. Maybe she walked, maybe she dreamed she did. Time turned soft, edges fading. She saw faces again, men she was riding to save, laughing around a summer fire, whiskey and sweat and music. She saw herself among them, hat low, chest flat, nobody guessing. She'd sung once when they weren't listening, soft, something her father had taught her. Now the wind tried to echo it, cruelly off-key. "Who do you think you are?" it hissed, curling around her like a snake made of air. She grinned into it, frost cracking on her teeth. "The one still movin'," she said. A flicker of light came low on the horizon. A lie at first, just the brain trying to hope, but it stayed when she blinked. It was small, steady orange where everything else was gray. The shack, or heaven, she didn't much care which. She climbed back into the saddle, boots clumsy, body shaking, and pointed the mare at that single ember. The horse stumbled twice, then caught rhythm again. The light grew, became a window barely holding its flame. She thought she saw a figure move in it, but it was her own shadow in the swirl. The last 100 yards took forever, snow waist deep, every step a small war. When the mare finally hit the porch rail, she almost went down with relief. She slid off, fell to one knee, laughed a broken sound. The door stuck, snow welded against it. She shouldered it once, twice, then it gave, and she spilled inside with the wind. The shack smelled like smoke long gone and loneliness that never left. She slammed the door with her back, breathing hard, lungs burning. Her gloves were boards. She peeled them off with her teeth. Her fingers were gray. "Move," she told them. "Move, damn you." She found the ashes in the stove and the bundle of kindling she'd left weeks back, maybe months. The matchbox was still on the shelf, dry by miracle. She struck one. It broke. Struck another. It flared blue and wild. She cupped it, fed it curls of pine until flame took root. The fire crawled up, slow but sure, a fragile little sun in that frozen dark. She held her hands over it till pain came back, sharp and welcome. The bindings under her coat had frozen stiff. She unbuckled the strap, loosened it till she could breathe deep again, chest lifting, ribs cracking from it. Steam rose off her like prayer smoke. The mare nosed the door from outside, low and worried. "You're next," she said, staggering up. She opened the door just wide enough to lead her in, shut it quick. The horse filled half the shack, eyes wild, breath fogging the walls. She rubbed the neck till both of them steadied. "Fire's small," she said, voice raw as gravel. "But it'll do. So will I." She dropped to her knees beside the stove and let the warmth lick her back, listening to the wind try and fail to find a way in. The world outside screamed its name. The world inside whispered hers, soft and certain. She closed her eyes, smiling through the ache. Work, not bravery. Always was, always would be. By dawn, the storm was tired but not done with her yet. The light came in gray, slow, half-hearted, as if the sun had decided to think twice. The shack groaned with the cold, the boards talking in small pops. She woke where she'd fallen beside the stove, cheek stiff from frost that had melted and frozen again, coat stiff, boots crusted white. The fire was still there, but only in memory, a low glow under ash that held on like stubborn faith. The mare stood with one hip cocked, head low, nostrils making tiny clouds. For a long time she just watched her breathe, the rhythm steady, alive. Then she moved. Moving hurt. Every bone argued, every muscle gave its small sermon on why it ought to quit. She didn't answer any of them. She pulled herself up by the edge of the stove, checked the coals, stirred them. Orange cracked through gray like something remembering itself. She added wood slow, coaxing, whispering nonsense words that sounded like prayer but weren't. Fire answered lazy, but it answered. She knelt there till her fingers thawed enough to hurt. The mare's leg was bad. The cut from the wire had swollen, crusted dark, but not deep enough to end her. She poured melted snow into her cupped hands, rinsed the wound, rubbed what she could, wrapped it again with the cleanest cloth she had. "Still with me?" she asked. The mare flicked an ear. That was enough. She poured what was left of the melted water into a bucket, let her drink. Then she sat back on her heels and breathed, slow, deliberate, like that alone might earn her another hour of being upright. The bindings under her coat had stiffened again in the night, soaked and frozen. She unbuckled them, one notch then another, until air came easy. Her chest lifted, ribs cracked with the sound of it. It felt like stealing breath from someone else. She touched the canvas and thought about how much of herself she'd hidden for how long. Out here, disguise didn't make sense anymore. Out here, the wind didn't care what name she'd been born with. The world outside had turned to silence. No storm now, just cold so deep it felt like listening to the inside of the earth. She opened the door to a thin dawn. The land stretched endless, white rolled over white, but now she could see the shape of things again. The line of the creek below, the low humps of buried sage, the far rise where the herd might be. Then she heard it, a sound so faint it could have been a trick of thought, low and far and hollow, a cow bawling, lonely and alive. She froze, listening. It came again, carried thin on the morning air. Hope doesn't sound like trumpets. It sounds like that. She closed her eyes, nodded once, then turned back inside. "We're going," she told the mare. Saddling took longer than she liked. Her fingers moved slow, the leather stiff, every strap an argument. The mare leaned on her good leg, patient. When the cinch finally caught, she pulled her hat low, tied the scarf back into place, and looked around the shack one last time. The ashes glowed, quiet as an old promise. "Fire's small," she murmured, "but it'll do." She swung up, gritted her teeth as pain found all its old addresses. The mare stepped into the morning with that careful grace only the hurt carry. Each hoofprint steamed before the cold took it. The world looked flat, empty, but it was watching. The ride down to the creek was slow, each yard earned. The snow had crusted in the night, thin glass over softer death. The mare's hoof punched through with every other step, the sound sharp and regular. She talked to her to keep them both from fading, talked about the herd, about Danvers and his busted leg, about the smell of spring mud. The words kept frost from forming inside her skull. "We'll see 'em soon," she said. "They'll be huddled up mean, tails to the wind, waitin' on fools like us to fetch 'em a chance." The mare answered with a snort that smoked in the light. The creek showed itself not by sight but by sound, a slow cracking under the snow, a groan that moved through the ground like a low voice. Dead Woman Creek earned its name honest. She reined in, scanning. The surface looked solid, smooth as marble, dusted white. The banks dipped steep. There'd be no easy cross. The lowing came again from the far side, clearer now, joined by another, smaller. She smiled despite herself. "Still breathin'," she said. "All right then." She nudged the mare forward slow. The ice sang under hoof, thin and uncertain. They made 5 steps before it changed pitch. She felt it through the saddle first, a hollow undernote that said no more. Back, she said, too late. The front legs broke through. Water surged black around them, cold as the other side of death. The mare lunged, chest deep, screaming. She slid from the saddle before the next crack, boots hitting ice that broke under her too. The shock took her breath clean away, stole it like a thief. She grabbed for the reins, caught leather, yanked, cursing through her teeth. The mare fought, eyes wide, forelegs flailing, the sound of it a gunshot rhythm. She pulled, dug her heels into what solid ice was left, felt it give, but not all the way. "Come on," she shouted, voice tearing. "Come on, damn you." She pulled again, every muscle a separate agony. Then the ice behind the mare gave too, and both of them were in water, waist high, then chest. The cold cut deeper than pain. It was absence, pure and total. She grabbed the horn, pushed from underneath, found the bank with one foot and shoved. The mare scrambled, found purchase, half climbed, half fell onto the far side. She followed, crawling, hands bleeding from the ice edges. When she reached solid ground, she collapsed against the mare's shoulder, both of them shaking hard enough to rattle teeth. They lay like that a long minute, steam rising, air whistling through nostrils, the sound of life insisting on itself. Finally she laughed, one dry bark. "We're across," she said. "Didn't say how, just said we'd be." She pulled herself up, legs numb, clothes frozen stiff. The mare's flank steamed, breath ragged, but her eyes were clear. "Good girl," she whispered. The bindings under her coat had torn free in the water, hung loose. She pulled them off, tossed them aside, watched them freeze where they landed. "No need for that now," she said softly. Her breath came out white, drifted away like a secret freed. The wind had died completely. The sun pushed weak light through a hole in the clouds, turning the frozen flats into mirrors. Across the field dark dots moved, cattle, alive, scattered but standing. She smiled, lips split, blood bright. "Work's the prayer that gets answered," she said, the old line tasting different now. She put a hand to the mare's neck, felt the pulse under the wet hide. "We ain't done." They took a step, then another, toward the moving shapes, slow and sure, leaving a trail that would freeze behind them but mark truth just the same. The creek cracked once more behind them, echoing their names, or maybe just reminding them who'd won the lesson. She didn't look back. The storm had spent itself, the world washed clean and cruel and fair. Her voice came quiet into the stillness, a line for nobody but her and the mare and maybe the sky that had watched too long. "Storm's done talkin'," she said. "I'm still listenin'." The echo carried it down the valley, soft, certain and gone. The wind had gone still, but the silence had teeth. It bit down slow, testing what was left of her. The mare limped but moved, each step a small defiance against the white that wanted to claim them both. The herd lay scattered across the flats, dark humps half buried, breath steaming, tails stiff. She counted shapes until the numbers started to blur, whispering under her breath the way she used to when her father taught her to mend fence in winter. "Keep your voice moving," he'd said, "or the cold'll think you're done." "Get up," she told the nearest cow, voice cracked thin. "Ain't time yet." The animal rolled its eyes, rose slow, shook off snow. She worked through them one by one, slapping flanks, coaxing, pleading, swearing, until a dozen heads turned her way. The sound of life returned by degrees, lowing, hoof shuffle, breath. The storm's ghost hung in the air, soft and gray, watching. She swung herself back into the saddle, legs numb, hands half dead, and turned the mare toward the dim horizon where the ranch waited. Behind her, the herd followed in uneven rhythm, a broken hymn of survival sung in hoofbeats and snorts. Each mile home cost something. The wind no longer screamed, it whispered instead, asking what she planned to leave behind in trade for making it back. Her skin burned where the cold had bitten, fingers black at the tips, but pain meant she still belonged to the living. She let the mare pick the line, trusted instinct over sight. The sun had crawled low, weak as an old lamp, when she started to hear her father again, his voice not from memory but from somewhere closer, like it had hitched a ride on the wind. "Work's the prayer that gets answered," it said, the same as always, only now it sounded less like command and more like forgiveness. She blinked hard, saw the faint rise where the creek flattened into open plain, the path she'd left yesterday already gone, covered by drift. No tracks to guide her back, just the pull of duty and the dim orange smear of smoke far ahead. The mare stumbled, caught herself, favoring the leg she'd torn, but didn't quit. "One more," she said. "That's all it ever is. One more." Her body moved out of habit now, not will. Fingers frozen to the reins, eyes half shut against light that hurt. The world narrowed to the sound of breath, hers, the mare's, the slow drag of hooves. Time stretched thin. The flat ahead shimmered blue with evening, the kind of cold that feels clean, cruel, holy. Her scarf was gone, lost to wind, hair unbound and stiff with frost. The bindings under her coat had come loose miles ago. She didn't care. The air bit through wool and canvas and skin, found her heart and held it hard. She started to hum, not for melody but memory, a tune her mother had used when the world got too loud, something low and round that filled the spaces between steps. The herd answered, low and slow, their voices folding into hers until the sound became one thing moving through snow. The ranch rose out of dusk like a ghost made solid, fence lines half buried, the main barn a dark hulk, the bunkhouse lamp burning small but steady. Smoke drifted from the cookhouse, thin and straight. She wanted to cry, but the tears froze before they started. The mare stumbled again, knees folding, caught herself, shook, kept going. "Good girl," she said. "Almost home." Her own voice sounded far away, echoing off the edges of her skull. The gate came into view just as the sun dropped behind the far ridge, the world turning that color between gold and blue where nothing decides what it wants to be. She saw movement, two figures running from the bunkhouse, coats flying, hats down, faces she knew but couldn't name through the blur. She tried to lift a hand, but it stayed on the horn, frozen there. The mare reached the gate, stopped dead, sides heaving. The herd behind fanned out, some collapsing to knees, others standing, steam rolling from them like morning fog. She tried to speak, managed a sound that might have been laughter or just the end of breath. Danvers reached her first, his limp slower than panic, eyes wide, face cut by disbelief and awe. "Who in hell?" he started, then stopped because the hat fell off her head, and the wind lifted the last of her disguise, hair loose, face pale, frost clinging to lashes. Silence dropped harder than the storm ever had. The second man, Eli, stopped beside him, mouth half open. Nobody said anything. The herd shifted, lowed, the sound deep as earth. Danvers looked from her to the animals, to the mare with her leg bound, to the torn coat, the open chest strap, the truth plain as daylight. He took one breath, slow, steady, and nodded once. "Reckon the storm finally met its match," he said, voice quiet enough to carry clean. She tried to smile, couldn't find the strength. "Just work, Danvers," she whispered, the words barely sound. "Always was." He reached up, caught her as she slid from the saddle. She felt the world tilt, the cold rushing out, warmth flooding in behind it. Hands took her weight, voices rose, not shouting, not cheering, just speaking her name, the real one this time, soft, certain. She caught glimpses as they carried her inside. The mare led toward the barn, head low but still proud. The cattle filing in through the gate like survivors of something sacred. The men moving slow, careful, learning from her without saying it out loud. The bunkhouse door opened, heat spilling out, and she let herself sink toward it, the noise fading behind her. The last thing she heard, the sound of the bell ringing somewhere far off in town, one clean note cutting through the cold, steady and true. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was earned. Snow melts slow where courage was spent, drip by drip off the eaves, each drop the sound of something forgiven. 3 weeks had gone since the blizzard broke, and the land still wore its bruises. Fences leaned, roofs sagged. The creek carried pieces of ice like ghosts being ferried downstream. But life had crawled back into Red Mesa's bones. The herd grazed on what grass dared to show, ribs still showing but eyes calm again. Danvers hobbled across the yard, his bad leg stiffer for the cold but moving. Eli's hand was mended enough to hold a hammer, though he cursed every swing. And she stood at the fence line, coat unbuttoned, gloves off, mending wire with one good hand and one still stiff from frostbite. The air was soft now, like breath on a wound that's finally clotting. Her hair was short, chopped uneven where the storm had taken it, her face no longer pale but burnished red with work and wind. The mare grazed nearby, scar healed, limping faintly when the ground dipped. Every so often she'd lift her head, look at the woman and snort as if to say, "We made it, didn't we?" And she'd nod back without words. The day stretched quiet, broken only by the creak of boards and the low murmur of men who'd run out of things to argue about. Nobody talked about what she'd done anymore. They worked beside her, slower maybe, but steady. Danvers said once in that half-joking way of his that the storm had made men out of all of them, and then, seeing the look she gave him, added, "And women too." She'd smiled faintly, gone back to the fence. No one used her old disguised name now. They called her Miss Calder when they needed her attention, or just me if they were feeling brave. The title didn't matter. What mattered was the work. By mid-morning the sun pushed harder, turning the snow to slush, dripping off the barn eaves, making puddles that froze again by sundown. The sound filled the yard like music. After lunch, coffee and hard bread, nothing fancy, she saddled the mare. The leather was oiled again, creak back in it, honest sound. Danvers frowned. "Town's still muddy," he said. "Best let the trail dry." She smiled. "Town'll dry faster if I ride through it," she said. He shook his head, pretending to grumble. "You always did talk like the weather listens." "Sometimes it does," she said, and mounted. The ride to town was slow, careful over thawing ruts. The land smelled different now, less like death, more like waking. Patches of grass showed dull green through the melt. A hawk circled low, wings dark against pale sky. When she crested the last hill, Red Mesa lay quiet below, rooftops glistening wet. She half expected the old silence, the kind that cut when she walked in before, but this time something had shifted. When she rode down Main Street, people looked up, paused, and instead of looking away, they nodded. Small, real. Miles Cutter stood outside the saloon, polishing glass with his usual pride. He set it down, wiped his hands and tipped his hat. "Miss Calder," he said. She nodded back. "Morning, Miles." Purcell from the print shop leaned out his door, ink on his sleeves, grin sheepish. "Got your story straight this time," he called. "Name spelled right, even." She raised a brow. "That'll be a first." He laughed, held up the paper, headline plain, "Storm Rider Saves Red Mesa Herd." No lies, no flourish, just truth in black ink. She rode on. At the schoolhouse the bell swung lazy in the breeze, its rope fixed new. Eva Reed and her students stood out front, cheeks red from cold and pride. The smallest girl pulled the rope once, and the clear tone rolled out across the street. Nobody cheered, they just listened. When it faded, folks went back to what they were doing, hammering, sweeping, hauling wood, but slower, like they were keeping time with the sound. She dismounted at the general store, tied the mare, bought salt, coffee, and nails. The storekeep, an old man with hands like bark, said nothing at first. Then, as she packed her goods, he said, "Weather's turnin'." "Heard the creek's running again." She nodded. "It's time." The ride back was warmer, air soft, sky wide open. The sound of dripping water followed her the whole way, a rhythm older than words. She passed the fence she'd mended that morning and thought of her father, of the day he'd taught her how to twist wire right. Work's the prayer that gets answered, he'd said, and she'd believed him less then than she did now. The line came back easy, like it belonged to the land, not him, not her. Work's the prayer, she murmured, and this here's the answer. By late afternoon she reached Dead Woman Creek. The name didn't fit anymore. The ice was gone in patches, water moving brown and quick, carrying bits of branch and straw, the last of winter's bones. She dismounted, walked the mare to the edge, crouched down. The place where she'd nearly died looked smaller now, less cruel. She found the rock she'd marked that day, half buried, washed clean. The river stone she'd carried through the storm still sat in her saddlebag, polished smooth by motion. She took it out, rubbed the surface with her thumb. "You took near everything," she said softly to the water, "and gave it back better." She set the stone on the high rock, let the sun hit it, watched it shine wet and true. The mare lowered her head to drink, ripples spreading out in rings that caught the light. Wind moved through the reeds, low and kind. For a long moment she stayed there listening. The creek made a sound like breath, not speech, not meaning, just life continuing. She thought of the men back at the ranch, the fence half done, the cattle spreading wider each day. She thought of the town bell, the kids, the new print on Purcell's page. None of it was about heroics. It was about keeping things going. She smiled, small and quiet, climbed back into the saddle. The mare turned for home without command. As they topped the rise, the sound of the bell came faint again, carried on warm wind. Noon. She stopped, listened. From here she could see the herd, tiny moving dots across the flats, the bunkhouse roof shining wet, smoke curling up from the cookhouse chimney. Red Mesa wasn't much, but it was alive. The bell rang again. The herd lifted their heads in unison. For one long breath the world went still. No wind, no hoof sound, just that bell fading into open air. Then everything moved again. Hammer strikes, cattle calls, laughter too far to hear words. The rhythm of the West starting over. She sat her horse a while longer, watching light spill across melting snow, dust rising gold where sun touched it. She felt the thaw in her hands, in her bones, in the world. The storm had taken her name, tested her truth, and handed both back, worn but real. She looked toward the mountains, saw clouds forming there, soft and harmless, for now. "Storms come to test what's real," she said, voice low, certain. "Work stays, so does truth." She clicked her tongue, and the mare started down the trail, hooves splashing through shallow melt, each step steady as a heartbeat. The sound of the bell faded behind her, replaced by the quiet hum of life returning. One hammer strike echoed from the yard, a clean note, clear as light on thawing ground. She smiled into the wind, eyes half closed, and rode on, the land shining around her, alive again, forgiving. You've been riding with Old Western Stories. If the tale hit your mark, give it a like, drop a comment about your favorite part, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next trail we ride. Don't forget, hit that subscribe so you're always in the saddle, and you'll always be ready when the next story rides in.